Peter and John, how are you both?
Oh,
I'm good, thank you.
And so let's get it right. This is the first time I've done it with two other people. So what I've just realized very, very quickly is that I'll use the names before the questions. Otherwise, we'll get in a muddle.
Yeah, one at a time, maybe.
Yeah. So Peter, obviously myself and John know each other. John is my friend and mentor. We met in January. I came out of a 20-year addiction in December last year. And NLP was something that I've found almost instantly. Ever since then, I've sort of increased in my knowledge through time, educating myself a lot around NLP with John's help. John is a bit of an onion, like yourself, in NLP. And it's something it's been a real powerful tool for me, especially the neurological levels of change method has been amazing. And I think more people should know it. I think more people should understand what NLP is. Obviously, I'd seen a lot of your stuff on YouTube. Myself and John were in your masterclass the other week when you spoke to the lady. And I just find it fascinating. Obviously, I'm an infant. I'm a toddler compared to the likes of you two. But it's a pleasure to have you in here, sir, because I believe NLP is a really, really powerful tool for anybody struggling with addiction, trauma, lack of self-worth, and those things. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
So, John, if you want to introduce yourself.
So my name's John, obviously, and in South Africa, I started NLP, I don't know, must be 25, 30 years ago. I am life and business coach. I use NLP more predominantly in business context. Myself also an addiction past, but that was 30 years ago, so I don't really consider myself an addict, an ex-addict, recovering addict. I've been out of it so long, it is just not part of my thinking. And it's a lot of the journey that I will take with people is to help them reshape their identities around being whole and well and focused on purpose rather than limiting unresourceful beliefs. Also just want to say, Peter, really nice to meet you, mate. I was looking for stuff on the Milton model, and I came across your video on So You Think You Know the Meta model, and it was stunning stuff. So nice to be in a session with you. Yeah.
Thank you. Good to meet you.
Oh, I'm just going to dive straight in. For me, one of the biggest, I will say the word issues for the sake of the conversation. A lot of people who are coming out of addiction into the recovery aspects of the world, we identify with this word addict, right? Even when people introduce themselves, my name is Joe Bloggs, I am an addict. And I think that obviously that's an identity statement. And even when I came into recovery, I couldn't say those words. I just couldn't do it. It was something, there was a scratch at the back of my mind, whatever it was. And it was saying to me, don't say those words. Do not say those words. I don't even identify as being in recovery anymore. I say I'm in discovery. I feel as though it's a much more powerful word to use for me personally. But I guess the first question I've got, and we'll start with Peter, is we talk about recovery, identity, and purpose a lot on this show. In your words, what is the biggest illusion people live under when it comes to changing or finding their identity when coming out of addiction?
The first thing that comes to mind is just coming back to what you were saying about identity and labels. And that's the stigma that we attach to these words and labels. And I think it's helpful to think, if you think about any job title you would ever have, any name or label that anybody would ever put on you, like son, daughter, father, mother, friend, employee, employer, whatever. Every label that describes you doesn't actually describe you. It describes your relationship with somebody else.
Okay.
And so everything, and this is one of the problems, and you mentioned neurological levels, this is one of the problems with it, is that it's a useful thinking model for some things, but it doesn't describe everything, like any model. And if we think of any label, any name that we would give ourselves, it's relational. And so a label like addict implies a relationship to something that is in control of your addiction. So to use the label addict, to think in terms of the structure of our language, which is a big part of what NLP is all about, and how the structure of our language reveals the structure of our life experience and our thought processes, and how that then determines our behavior and our reactions to things that are going on around us. To accept the identity of addict means that something else is in control of your behavior. And if we look at things like the famous 12-step process, one of those steps is admitting that you have no control. And you kind of do that by even adopting the label of addict. You said that you prefer a word like discovery to recovery. And that word has a different implication, different sets of relationships. So I think the first thing that comes to my mind is that whatever label that you choose for yourself, whatever identity, think about the relationships that it implies rather than what it says about you. And through the relationships that it implies, who is that relationship with? And there's a very true cliche, which is that if you want to change something in your life, no matter how big or small, then one of the most important things to do is to change the system that you are part of. And one of the things that we all do in order to serve our addictions, our needs, and we might say that an addiction is just a need that's stuck on repeat. And one of the things that we do is we surround ourselves with people and places that serve that need. And so, if you have a need to feel useful and valuable, we will surround ourselves by people who are quite happy to use us and make use of our time and our talents and so on. And if in the workplace, it's quite a common thing for there to be groups of smokers who will go out and have a smoking break together. And one of the most important things for somebody to do if they want to give up smoking is stop hanging around with those people, because they'll be, oh, come on, one more won't matter. And that need to be part of that social group is the addiction in some ways, not the cigarettes. And so if we don't think about the relationships that are implied in the labels that we attach to ourselves, or that we allow other people to attach to ourselves, then to some extent we become influenced or even controlled by, in extreme cases, by the other parties who are active within those relationships.
I like that a lot.
Yeah.
Is there a scenario, Peter, of a label? I'm not sure how to structure the question yet. Is there a label of sorts that the relationship is more focused inward rather than outward? And how would you see that?
I think there is. I think if you were marooned on a desert island alone, and there's nobody else to talk to. We've seen films like Castaway where Tom Hanks invents this, an imaginary friend basically to overcome the issue of loneliness. But if you were moved on a desert island, or if you're just by yourself all day, how do you refer to yourself? When you're talking to yourself inside your head, what do you call yourself?
Wow.
Okay.
Not a trick question. What do you think?
Call myself by my
So
name.
I'll go first. Go on. You go first, John.
I call myself by my name.
Okay, so
Yep.
just John.
Yeah.
And good. Okay.
Yeah.
So honestly, over the last 8 months, I've started calling myself Zito. It's a name that has been given to me. So the Zito Run is an American slang term, and that's the name of the podcast, the Zito Run. Whenever I think in my head now, I have this picture and a name around the Zito. It's been a huge tool, a huge process in changing or finding my identity. More importantly,
And that's something very common that people do in a period of significant change in their lives. And, they might turn to a particular spiritual movement and choose a name that's relevant within that. So it's a very common thing for people to do. But let's say you forgot your name. What would you call yourself when you're having a conversation inside your head?
Sure.
When you say when you say what would I call myself, do you mean from a belief standpoint or a behavior?
Or having a conversation in your head about the day ahead or what to have for lunch or whatever it might be. What do you say to yourself inside your head if you're not using your name?
Mate, probably.
I use words. Yeah, I'd say, well, I'm having steak and eggs for dinner.
I.
Yes.
Okay.
Or me.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So if we take away all the relationships, what's left is I or me.
I am me.
I or me says nothing about any static definition or label or a job title or addict or whatever. And then to make that a complete sentence, we've got to add an action.
Yes.
So every statement in every language everywhere around the world has to have three minimum components: a subject, a verb, and an object. So there's me, I, there's an action, and then there's something that I'm performing that action with or to. So I, to use your example, I'm going to have steak for lunch. There's a simple statement. I'm the subject. That's me doing it. I'm choosing. And it says nothing about who I am. Oh, so you're a meat eater, are you? No. Just because I'm going to have meat for lunch doesn't define me. And, there's a very common idea in therapy that your behavior doesn't define who you are. But what people do is they take a behavior out of time and they make it a thing and they make it a possession or they make it an immutable quality of you. So you're permanently a meat eater or a vegan. You're permanently an addict. And I think that's one of the challenges that you're alluding to is how do you then move on from that when you've gotten yourself to a place where you're happy to accept that label? How do you then move beyond that? What's the next label? And I think if you think the label is always I, what's the behavior? So I am recovering rather than I am in recovery. It's a different, you might say, oh, it's just words, it's just semantics, it doesn't mean anything. But behind those words is a neurological structure and series of processes which are, and the same processes drive your language as drive your behavior. So if you're saying I am in recovery, I'm in a room, I'm in a car, I'm in a kitchen, and that's it. It doesn't tell you anything about where I've come from, where I'm going. I am recovering. It's not just semantics. It's changing the frame of reference so that you are traveling from place to place. Recovering from what? in order to what or towards what. And when people use words like recovery, freedom is a common one, we tend to think about the constraint or the thing that we're trying to get away from and recovering from.
Mm.
We don't talk about recovering to.
Mm.
So for an addict in recovery, okay, it seems obvious what they're recovering from. Probably isn't that straightforward.
Mm.
But what are they recovering to? And I think that's can be a more useful direction to explore.
John?
Yeah, I like that. So just, I'm curious, Peter, if in dealing with, I don't necessarily want to, Lee, to limit the conversation to in terms of recovery and addiction.
Oh, it's okay.
But in terms of, I like the neurological levels of change. I do use it a fair amount. Labels as
You
such.
two carry on.
Is this something we should avoid?
I'm not sure because if you, we'll have to refer to people and things outside of ourselves. We're surrounded by so much, and it's quite a common thing, isn't it? If you're at home, your friend or your partner or whoever says to you, "Oh, can you pass me the thing?" And if you know each other well enough, you know exactly what thing they're talking about. But in a normal situation, we have to be specific, and we have to identify things in people in the world around us, and a big part of that is in a social hierarchy is relational. But I think what's important is to then not become constrained by those labels, and we've all told stories and heard stories about Jobsworths and people who are constrained by a job title, for example. But we allow ourselves, we allow ourselves to be given labels. And as children, you are good or you are bad. And then that becomes an identity, not because we're a victim or we're passive to that, but because we figure out a way to make that suit us. It suits me very well to be the dropout or the bad guy or the unreliable person or whatever, because one of the things that we do as humans is we don't just survive, we thrive. We take whatever's going on and we make it an advantage. And so it's not, I've always been labeled as a, people always said I'd never achieve anything in life, so what's the point? Well, it takes a lot of pressure off. It's quite a convenient way to live, and and nothing wrong with convenience.
One of the biggest things, one of my biggest labels that I had was, well, I'm from a council estate. I've had bad things happen to me when I was a young boy. I'm always going to be this way. This is the way we all are in North Wales, in the council estates that we live in. This is what we do. We work, we take drugs, we drink. And how wrong was I? Because this year I've met John. Obviously, John's taught me so much about myself. I'm studying psychology. I've done a diploma in neuroscience around addiction. I'm studying NLP. And these are things that I never, ever, 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 and it is a generalization, thought that I could do. I never thought that these types of things would be possible for somebody like me. And I'm proof. I am proof. And this is what I want to keep on doing. I am proof that if I can do it, literally anybody can. Because I was a high school failure. And I'd studying and reading, and it never crossed my mind. All through my 20s and early 30s, never crossed my mind. And I'm sat here having a conversation with two people who have never dream of speaking to 2 years ago, and that's the beauty. If we allow ourselves the space in our unconscious to do a bit, we'll do a bit. The brain's a powerful thing, and I just wish people would understand this process a lot more.
I think it's interesting that you use the word possibility there. That you wouldn't have imagined that the things that you've mentioned would be possible. Let me ask you a question then. Where does that possibility come from? How is that possibility presented to you? Because I'm going to take a wild guess here, and I'm going to guess that the word possibility is a common word what you use, but I'm going to guess that that's not really what you mean.
Okay. I mean, it was it was off the tongue. It was a word that just came out, but I guess.
And it's a great word, because it's a word like empowerment, and it's a word that implies, opportunity and all that sort of stuff. So it's a great word. But what was in your mind when you think about what has made all of these things possible for you? What's changed for you?
Love, if I'm being honest. Love for myself and love from other people. If I'm being totally honest, if that's the word, and I get emotional there, so I know that's the right word.
Mm-hmm.
I never loved myself for a long, long time. I probably did. I just didn't understand what love was, to accept love and to give love. It was very, very difficult for me to, apart from my grandparents and my children, I struggled to give love out. And now I love myself. I'm able to love people. You're probably going to pick this word apart, but the right way,
Not at all. I think anybody who's experienced the difference would understand, and anybody who hasn't experienced the difference has no idea what you're talking about. So yeah, it just struck me when you said about possibility that it was something more like support or even permission to do the things that you've done in the last couple of years.
When you say support, do you mean support of people or support of myself? What do you mean?
Well, it's always other people.
Right.
And permission as well. You're just a kid from a council estate. You're not allowed to do these things. People, there's a barrier. There's a barrier to entry to this next level of society where, people have podcasts or, nice jobs or whatever it might be, or good relationships even.
Yeah, I think it's both. Support from John and my fiance. That's been huge for me, because again, trust was huge for me for a long time, and two people that I didn't really know. Well, I didn't know a couple of years ago, and I trust these people with the deepest, darkest secrets of my life, and it's been emotional. I'm enjoying it a lot.
And I think it reveals a really important point that I think gets forgotten, especially in all the self-help hype that you see on social media. People talking about being self-made and, look at all this great stuff I've done for myself, and I got my own life back on track. And so it's rubbish. It's rubbish. Nobody ever did anything by themselves. There's hardly anything that you can do by yourself. You can breathe, you can move your arms and legs. That's about it. You don't get more than about 6 feet before you need somebody else to do something for you. To have laid the floorboards that you're walking on, to have supplied the water that comes out of your tap, to, to all the things that we rely on to, provide the internet for us to be talking over right now. We are so dependent on other people, and the bigger society gets, the bigger civilization gets, the more most of those people become invisible to us. But, how much, we've got a little vegetable patch in the garden. We can grow about a week's worth of potatoes, really. So, the idea that people are self-sufficient And the idea that being self-sufficient is a good thing, I think that's very damaging, actually. And this whole idea of self-awareness and that we should be in search of enlightenment through self-awareness, from my mind, it's nonsense. I think what we should be thinking about and working on is other awareness and learning about our impact on other people and other people's impact on us, and how we can work and collaborate and communicate in the networks of people that we're so dependent on. We can afford to go to the supermarket or shop online and not have to communicate with another human being. We can go to the supermarket, we can put our stuff on the conveyor, and the checkout person said, "You having a good day?" And you can say, "Yeah." And nobody has to know anything about anybody else. We don't have to communicate or transact or get to know anybody, and we can protect ourselves by hiding away, detaching. But it's an illusion. It's a we insulate ourselves from the pain of interacting with other people, and in doing so, we lose out on the kind of joy and richness and fulfillment that you're talking about when you talk about love. Imagine having that connection with anybody that you meet because you're willing to have an actual conversation with people.
John?
I think it's very powerful, Peter, in conjunction to the addicts kind of becoming so, the way I've started this conversation, becoming so so introspective that they are quite happy to insulate themselves from the society around them, unless it's going to meetings about recovery. They're really limiting their contact to people that can identify with what it is they're going through. Not that I think that's necessarily always healthy. I think sometimes they need a bit of exposure. But just in terms of what you're saying, is what struck me while you were talking is how beneficial it would be in the light of Lee and his journey for the last 8 months, putting himself out to have the conversations with people he wouldn't normally have conversations with, to connect with me and have a conversation. I'm sitting halfway around the world, to connect and be willing to share with somebody that's not necessarily, going to see the world in the same way, not just down the road, not experiencing the same weather, not experiencing the same, political. I was saying to Lee, my environment, I live quite close to a mall, and they're celebrating Diwali tonight, and we've got fireworks going. It sounds like a war zone. I know what it's for, so it's very far away from being a war zone. But I think if anybody else could actually hear that, you can't think it was a war zone. But just in light of my circumstances and surrounding is so vastly different from Lee's, and for us to get together and have a conversation and shift and change perspectives, I think that could be a very healthy thing all round in recovery for people walking that path.
Oh, absolutely. Because let's say we take in the old days before the internet, let's take a gambling addict. So they might go to, it's a bit of a cliche, but they might go to a casino. And they're surrounded by other people who are gambling, because that's why you go to a casino. And that behavior is normal in that context. But outside of that context, they feel that behavior is out of control, or it's a problem, or more likely other people are telling them that. And so they hide the behavior. They don't tell people where they're going. Don't necessarily lie about it, just don't advertise it. And then, let's say they join a Gamblers Anonymous group, and in the old days before the internet and so on, they would have to go to a physical place and meet people. So where are they now? With other addicts again, and normalizing that. And in order to be accepted into that community, they have to pass a rite of passage, which is to admit that they are addicts. And that's great. You're one of us now. You're in recovery now. You're one of us. But again, to come back to what we've mentioned previously, how do they then transition out of that? So they found a new community. And that becomes, and that whether we like it or not, and how much care we put into crafting those sorts of activities and groups, that comes with its own social pressures. And so I think to concentrate on, and it's a difficult thing to do, because I think by the nature of the way that we create our mental map of our environment, we do put labels on things and people, and we do put people in boxes and say, that's Fred and he's a plumber, and that's Jack and he's a news agent or whatever. And we put people in those boxes, and it's confusing when we see somebody outside of that box. I thought you were a plumber. I didn't know you did electrics as well. Yeah, I do both. You do both? How is that possible? Anybody who's had, more than one interest, like, I have a few different things that I do in my business, and people say, I thought you were this thing. You can't be that thing as well. But I think if we concentrate on the actions rather than the static labels, we have a more interesting conversation. But I think if we're stuck in the labels, then I might imagine somebody coming up to me and saying, "Hello, I'm Lee and I'm an addict." And the first thing that crosses my mind is, I didn't ask. I was happy just to hear that. I was happy just to know that you're Lee. I don't need to know what you are in order to have a conversation with you. It doesn't. And if anything, now that has changed the tone of the conversation that we're going to have. But I didn't ask, is my first thought. So, just because there's something that and I think this is one of the I mentioned the word stigma earlier on. I think this is one of the challenges that we face when we're making any sort of change in life. We think that people know what's going on inside, and they don't know largely, and they don't care. If we did share what was going on inside, I think an awful lot of people would say, "Oh, yeah, me too." Don't get me started. I remember doing an NLP master practitioner training a few years ago. I used to do, before Brexit, used to do residential trainings in Spain, which were tremendous fun. And we were sitting around the table one day, and this lady suddenly interrupted and burst out and said, I was going to tell you, I used to be an addict. And I said, well, we all are. And another lady said, "Whoa, speak for yourself. That's outrageous. You're not an addict." I said, "Of course we're all addicted. Tea, coffee, love, attention." She's like, "Oh, yeah, okay." The pattern and the chemical are two different things, and it's so easy to conflate the two, and as part of putting that responsibility outside of ourselves. I can't help it. It's just the way I am. As opposed to, it's what I'm choosing to do right now. In 5 minutes' time, I can do something else if I feel like it.
I think when you talk about love, I was listening to a neuroscientist called Mark Lewis. He speaks about love and addiction having a very, very, very similar neurological structure. Which is, it's ironic, really. It was only a couple of days ago that I was listening to it, and then you said that, and when he explained the process of, me and John have spoke about it before, the anterior cingulate cortex part of the brain, the process in love and behavioral addiction or a chemical addiction is almost like 99% the same process, which quite fascinating, really, when you think of it from this way, because one of the biggest things I've learned from meeting John is a lot of people would rather feel safe in their story than happy. And when we ask difficult questions, or I do it still myself. I'm still learning, and I'm still adapting to this process, if you like. And when even when I ask difficult questions to people, instantly they will go into their story. I can't learn because I've got ADHD or I'm bipolar or I'm suffering with PTSD. And I think that in itself is an addiction. You know, it's an addictive process in the brain where rather than us opening ourselves up to the ability of growth or change, we feel safe within our own story. So we close off. And when we talk words, right, you two know words a lot. It sounds stupid to say somebody knows words better than you, but you do, right? And but we feel safe within this bracket of words that allow us to almost unconsciously allow that the negative behavior, if you'd like, you know. And it's saddening because it's something that is passionate. Speaking about mental health now is a passion of mine, and if only it's easy to say, right, when I'm in a growth position, but there's a lot of people who's struggling and a lot of people who are dealing with pain on a daily basis. And, you know, a lot of this pain is make believe. We make these pains up in our head, these anxieties, these worries. And I genuinely believe NLP is a tool that people should know more about. You know, I think it's so powerful the way that people like yourselves talk and communicate and allow people like, you know, people who are struggling to understand that, you know, the map isn't the territory and we can be better and be more. And it's, yeah, that's my rant.
No, I think that's a fair point, and I think allowing ourselves to be labelled for the convenience of others is, you know, I think there's an aspect of status in that and relative status, and I think when you've got, you know, if you're in a position in life where you're interacting with a lot of authority figures like police or teachers or social workers and so on, it's very easy to accept those labels and then get stuck there. And then, as I said, to use that as or to find a way to thrive in that, and to become resigned to that as well. I think because, well, yeah, what's the alternative? The alternative might not be any better. And the way I've always said it to people is that, very similar to what you said, the way I've always phrased it is that people would rather be right than be happy. Because there's comfort in certainty and being able to predict the future. And whilst on one hand, we want things to change, also we generally don't want things to be different. So, yeah, and I think creating change is about breaking the systems that we've created around ourselves. You know, the people that we hang around with, the places that we live, the labels, the job titles, all of these things. These are the difficult things to change because we believe that they make us who we are. But then anybody, I think, who has actually been through that process or period of their lives, you know, up to that point of change, they will say, you know, it's impossible, I can't do it, can't change whatever for whatever reasons. As soon as they pass that tipping point, it's easy to do. And they wonder, you know, and I think something we haven't talked about, but in terms of the moving on from the period of addiction, and I find it certainly in my work with individuals, one of the biggest motivations and biggest barriers to the process of change is regret. And, you know, you mentioned a number of times how valuable you found learning NLP. One of the promises that NLP makes is that change can be very fast. It can be from a technical point of view, but the problem it creates is people will think, if it was this easy to change this aspect of me or my life, why didn't I do it before? And that regret can make it more plausible that actually nothing changed. It was just a party trick. And if it's that easy to change something, then it's also that easy for the client to change it right back to where it was. And that's one of the challenges. So one of the things that quite often gets done by that is the people present to people who practice things like NLP and CBT and so on is fears and phobias. So if you've been afraid of spiders all your life, somebody in the space of 10 minutes takes that phobia away, however they do that, then you're presented with well, how did that happen so fast? This has been who I have been for all my life. Suddenly it's changed. Now what do I do? What do I do as a person who isn't afraid of spiders anymore? I don't know what to do. And so it's very easy to just put that back the way that it was. Because it was learned in the first place, you weren't born with that. So it's learned in the first place. And it can be unlearned and it can be relearned. So if we don't help people deal with the what comes next, and I think certainly in the healthcare system, certainly in the UK, that is very much focused on treatment of the chemical nature of addiction. And then once that's treated as if it's an illness, that's it, you're out, well, nothing else we can do for you, you're on your own now. It's very easy for that sense of regret and loss for the person, they'll call it a relapse. It's not really a relapse. The thing was never cured. It was never an illness to cure, but that pattern was never broken.
Yeah, I agree.
But it keeps the healthcare professionals busy, so they're happy.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of people who I know come out of rehab, and within a week they're back to exactly where they were beforehand. So yeah, I couldn't agree more with that.
And why have you thought that happened?
My belief was they haven't fixed the process. They've cured the output, the out or the chemical dependency, if you like. But it's like, I'm going to use an analogy here, which probably doesn't describe a human very well. But when you take a car through a car wash, you clean the car, but inevitably you drive down a road again, and it starts to pick up dirt and muck and grind, and that's what I've seen. A lot of people, some people who are really close to me, have been to rehab, almost lost their life before they went to rehab, and came out and carried on doing the same thing. There's been no behavioral change whatsoever.
And why would there be? We all self-medicate. We all get a headache and ignore it. Get a headache and take a paracetamol. We all self-medicate. We'll fix something ourselves, ignore it first, and then try and fix it ourselves. And often the bigger that problem becomes, we've gone so far down the road of self-medication that actually now, to go to somebody, it's like taking your car to the garage and saying, this thing just fell off the engine just 5 minutes ago as I was driving down the road. And the mechanic says, "What? This is a mess. This is big. Who's somebody's already had a look at this." No, this just happened all by itself. I don't know anything about it. We've all thinking, oh dear. We've all tried to fix things ourselves and made them worse. And the very first thought whenever we encounter a problem is not get some help. The first thing is apply more force. If the lid won't come off, apply more force first. Don't read the instructions first.
Yeah.
So and this is part of the what you were saying about the sort of neurological basis of addiction. It's part of the same process that the brain learns these patterns of responses to the outside world. And that pattern works most of the time. That response works most of the time. So, you get your smartphone and you want to open your messaging app, so you tap the screen. And the phone gives you a little bit of feedback to let you know that your tap has been received. So the icon flashes, and then very quickly you'll see the app will open up and so on. And you won't give it a second thought. If you tap the phone and the icon doesn't flash, what do? You tap it again and again. And even though logically you know it's a stupid thing to do, you tap it harder.
Yeah, yeah.
Because that's how your brain, the programming in your brain, is designed. And, and with mechanical things, trying to get the lid off the milk or whatever it is, that works most of the time. Oh, it doesn't, that's weird. And then we apply more force and then we break it. So, these patterns, and the pattern of addiction that you were saying earlier about, the connection with love, if you think neurologically, we are evolved for maximum survival. And if you find something that feels really good, it tastes really good, like a really sweet fruit. It's the first time I ever had mangoes. I'm like, oh my God, mangoes are the most amazing thing ever. I've got to eat all the mangoes. And then, after a while, you become, a bit more ambivalent. You calm down a little bit. I still like mango. I don't have to eat so many of them. And, if you think when you're a teenager and you start listening to music and you hear a song and think, oh my God, this is the most amazing song ever. Its lyrics tell me everything about my life. I must listen to this song on repeat for the next 24 hours. And then you calm down a bit. Once your brain has adjusted to incorporate that input into its programming. But there are many things in the world that are often artificially created. And I don't know which sort of scientists would call them. They're psychologists, I guess, anthropologists maybe, super stimulated. So these are things which are so exaggerated to press certain buttons that we have that we almost never reach the point where we've had enough of it and we can calm down and and now just be normal around that favorite song or mangoes or chocolate or, whatever we've had for the first time. And there's a beetle, and the beetle's shell is brown and very shiny, glass-like, iridescent, with little bumps on it. And it looks pretty much like the bottom of a beer bottle that's got these little sort of dots around it to stop it getting stuck in the bottling machines and so on. And so there are these beetles, I think it's in America, that are at risk of becoming extinct because all the male beetles prefer mating with beer bottles than with other beetles, with lady beetles. Because they look at a lady beetle and think, yeah, she's all right, a bit skinny. And then they look at this Budweiser bottle by the side of the road and say, Jesus, look at that! And these beetles lose interest in the lady beetles because the beer bottle is a super stimulator for the beetle. And so we see this in caricatures, in social media, AI generated images of the opposite sex, these ridiculous caricatures of what men or women should look like. And this is a huge problem for teenagers who are finding it increasingly difficult to have healthy relationships because they don't know what a member of the opposite or same sex or whatever they're drawn to should look like. And so, and when we've got corporations who gain from exploiting those irresistible buttons that we all have evolved into us, it's very, very difficult to resist. And I think realistically the only thing that we can do is just being aware of it and being open about it and talking about it. And as a bunch of people, friends at work or colleagues at work or going out with your friends or whatever, say, whoa, look at that beer bottle. It's not normal, it's just a beer bottle. You don't want that. If these beetles talked to each other, they'd be like, what are you doing? What are you doing with that beer bottle? It's not, it's not a healthy relationship. We don't normalize the right things. We don't talk to each other because of that isolation.
Yeah. The normalization of drug usage within society is now that I've stepped out of that square, we'll say, it's crazy to see how normalized it is within society.
Yeah. Yeah.
Good.
Which is fine when that normalization is, I've tried it, I can take it or leave it, not fussed.
Yeah. Not the
Versus,
case, though.
I'm out of control, I'm an addict, I can't help myself.
Yeah.
It's something that's happening to me. And we're talking about, in the case of drug addiction, we're talking about chemicals which are engineered and created to be way, to stimulate the nervous system way in excess of anything that's naturally occurring. And that's a really tough thing to resist. And as I say, I think the first step is just acknowledging and, being able to talk openly about the fact that that's the case. And knowing that that's not real. The Beatles knew, I can have a big poster of the beer bottle on my bedroom wall, but I know that's not real.
Do you think, Peter, that people are able to identify that it's not real without external input in some way?
I think that's tricky because all of our sensory systems are difference detectors.
Mm-hmm.
And so every judgment that we make is based on a sensory comparison. And if somebody shows you a picture of a lady beetle and then a beer bottle, you're going to go, well, I'll take the beer bottle, thanks. If your limited perception is, I'm looking for something that's brown, shiny, and bumpy, I'll take the big one, please. So I think without a context for that comparison, it's very, very difficult for us to self-correct. And I think when we come together as groups and we're able to talk openly and make comparisons and say, well, this is what I'm finding. And other people say, well, it's not what I'm finding. Not to be judged and told, wow, you're weird, that's not normal.
Yeah.
But to provide alternative points of reference for you to decide, what am I actually comfortable with? Do I feel a bit silly having done that, or do I want to make a different choice? And I think often through that stigmatization that we mentioned earlier, I think people are caught in this dichotomy, this dilemma between good and bad, doing something that's right and normal and something that's bad and deviant and is outside of society and belongs in dark corners and derelict buildings and so on. So I think that normalizing is important, not to make it okay to do whatever you want, but to be able to communicate with people who you would regard as peers and therefore trust and respect the opinions of. Like we used to do in the workplace, before everybody started home working, you'd go to work and you would be party to conversations with people you didn't agree with. And people talking about things like football teams or politics and, saying stuff that you don't agree with. And what are you going to do if you don't agree with people? Say, well, I'm just going to shut myself away in a little bubble and I only surround myself with people who agree with me, which is, of course, what we do with social media. And almost nobody is listening to this podcast because they're not interested. Yeah, it's relevant to somebody, and that's why they've sought it out or continue to listen to it. And so we're surrounding ourselves with things that make us feel normal, and and opinions that we agree with, and things that we like. And I think when we put ourselves into scenarios, as you said earlier, where we're talking to people who we wouldn't normally talk to, we're hearing different perspectives, and we're having to adjust our worldview based on that. And that doesn't mean the other person's right and you're wrong. Neither of you is right or wrong, because we're talking about opinions and perceptions and judgments. But if we're not exposed to a wide variety of points of reference, how are we ever going to decide what to choose for ourselves?
Yeah.
I've got a question for both of you going off the back of that. You hear this, it's used as a power phrase, right, on social media. You've got to hit rock bottom. right? You've got to hit rock bottom. The only way is up. Well, so 4 years ago, Peter, I attempted to take my own life. And people said to me, oh, the only way was up from there, mate. That's what even now people say, the only way was up. Well, it was up, down, left, right, backflip. You know, it wasn't always up. And when people say you've got to hit rock bottom, you need to hit rock bottom. As we know, we have a suicide pandemic, I believe. And for me, that shows that, you know, when some people hit rock bottom, they kill themselves. So my question for both of you is, one, do you believe we have to hit rock bottom? And I can tell from your reactions, it's probably a no. And two, how do we go about the rectification at an earlier stage, or understanding ourselves and where we are within the boundaries of life, and how do we go about that?
John, I'll let you start.
I don't think we should be hitting rock bottom. I think it is part of our nature, though. We get comfortable in the situations that we're in, and we're comfortable to continue that status quo until we hit that so-called rock bottom, where, as Peter was saying just now, we've suddenly got something to compare with. I think we've become numb to the consequences of our action. Throwing a pebble in water is going to cause a ripple, and I think people are aware of it. What we're not always aware of is, it doesn't matter how small that stone is, by throwing that stone into that river, lake, ocean, you are going to change the layout or the edge of the water. It might be minuscule, depending on the size of the water that you throw it on, but there is an impact. And I think we are so numb to the fact that there are consequences to my actions. And instead of looking down the road and saying, well, this is the inevitable outcome of the seed that I'm sowing carrot seeds, I'm going to get carrots. I'm sowing carrot seeds, but I really want apples. That we need to get to the place where we're saying, I feel people should be at the place where they're aware of the consequences of the actions, the outcome of the actions. Or now, how do we do that? I don't know if I've got an answer. I don't know if I've got it, but I'm very keen to know what it is.
Yeah, good, very good points. And I think the way I see it is actually, yes, we do have to hit rock bottom.
Oh,
but rock bottom is an illusion. If you think you're on one side of a hill, you're driving along and you've got to be the other side of a hill. At some point, you've got to go over the top of the hill. You don't know you've gone over the top of the hill until you're coming down the other side. So it's not you have to go over the hill to get to the other side. Well, yeah, but it's a way of defining the turning point. It's a bit like a CV or resume, whatever word you use. We write it in hindsight. We don't write a CV before we've had the career. We write it afterwards. And so you look back and you can say, oh, this was the high point of my career, or this was the low point of my career. But you didn't intentionally head into that.
Mm.
So I think, yes, it felt like a low point, and and that's something I've experienced in my life as well. It was I can identify it as a turning point. Was it rock bottom? Well, relative to where I was either side of it, or where I felt I was either side of it, yes. But that doesn't mean that I think we should be very careful of judging the quality of our lives by other people's standards. So just because what somebody else calls rock bottom based on what they experienced doesn't mean they get to judge that where you are isn't bad enough for you to want to change it.
Well,
I think rock bottom is a phrase that we can apply retrospectively, after we've turned a corner, however we define that. And I think that in practice, it's not a big thing. It's something really, you talked about sort of attempting to take your life, but it's the realization is not like a blinding flash of light and suddenly my life has changed. It's a little thing that changes. And when I think of something that was a big turning point for me in my life, it was being in a room, in a conversation with other people, and suddenly feeling like I'd just woken up and thinking, hang on, what's going on here? And it sounds such a little tiny thing, but that at that point in my life was life-changing. And everything after that point seemed very, very different to what had come before. Now, to your standards, you might say, well, that's not rock bottom. You weren't trying to kill yourself. But it was the bottom of my particular journey at that point. And so I think, I guess a couple of things. We're all going to look back and see a turning point. And whether that seems like rock bottom according to somebody else's criteria doesn't matter. It's the point at which you came to your senses, people would say, and thought, what am I doing? Okay, it's time to go in a different direction.
Me and John had a conversation a couple of days ago, actually. There was a gentleman who commented on one of my videos, and he by knowing my family as when I was a child, he was under the illusion that he knew everything about my life. And he said to me, you don't know nothing about mental health struggles. I know more than you'll ever know. Which I found, well, I went through a few emotions. Initially, I was pissed off. And then I wanted to react in a aggressive manner. Then I felt disappointed that people still have this illusion of that they know best because they've been through some stuff. And then I felt sad. It made me sad that there's people out there in the world that have struggled, and they think they're alone, and they think that nobody understands their pain. And I'm a big believer in pain sees pain. Somebody who's experienced pain, whatever that looks like, whether it's a physical or emotional or psychological pain, pain sees pain. And that's where the ability to have an emotional, in-depth conversation comes from. And that's what made me sad. It made me sad that he struggles in silence. And that's the issue that we have in the world, right? Especially in men.
Yeah, it screams, I'm alone, doesn't it? You can't understand me. You haven't been through what I've been through. You couldn't understand. And one way of looking at that is that's a passive response. It's there's a loneliness, there's a sadness in it, an isolation in it. Another way of looking at it is that it's a projection. It's an act. I'm going to make you not understand me so that I can be alone, because that's where I want to be. Whatever you say, whatever story you tell me, I'm going to say that's different. That doesn't count. It's not the same thing. I'm going to make sure, I'm going to project my need to be different onto you and make it your fault for not understanding, because I don't want to be understood.
Yeah.
And I think both are possible.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's sort of the similar feedback to what John gave me. So it's the projection, right? John?
I like the way you so eloquently frame it, Peter. Just a lot of your videos, the way you get to the underlying emotions, or like you're saying with this guy, he wants to be alone. I got fascinated with your videos, just at how easily you pick up the undertones when you hear something and you get to the truth underneath that. I got to say, is truly remarkable and impressive.
Thank you. And I think a simple rule of thumb is to always assume that the individual is in control.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because ultimately,
I think of the guy who I worked with who wanted help with. He felt that he was drinking excessively, and when I asked him to tell me, a bit of backstory, he said he would come home from work, and the kids are there and they're running around the house, and so he goes into his little study at home and locks himself away and has a glass of whiskey, and that's when he feels like he relaxes. And he talked about stress and about shouting at his kids and all these sorts of things, very common things, I guess, for people to experience. But actually the locking himself away and the shouting at the kids and the emotional outbursts and the use of alcohol as part of that, it was a way of giving himself space. Because part of his rule set was it's not okay because there's so many other demands, and wife's been with the kids all day and so on, and it's not fair on her and all of this. And there's so many other demands and other pressures in this family system. It's not okay for me to come home from work and say, I just need 10 minutes to be by myself for a bit. And we find it often so difficult just to ask for what we want. But what we end up doing, but that need doesn't go away. So we end up coming up with all these complicated ways of getting what we want without having to ask for it. So rather than saying, I need a bit of space, a bit of time, just quiet, just to relax after work, to which, is his wife going to say, well, that's ridiculous. I haven't had 10 minutes to sit down all day. You're lazy thing. You've been out lazing around at work, sitting in your office all day, and I'm going to, or is she more likely to say, sure, come in when you're ready? I don't know, but the point is that he didn't know either. He jumps immediately to the conclusion that she's going to tell him no, he can't have any time to himself. And so he has to find a way of creating that. And this is something I used to do. I became conscious of that, I would be very sort of prickly and if I wanted just a bit of time to myself, I'd create that time by pushing people away, being objectionable and pushing other people away, rather than saying, just give me 10 minutes.
When I was using cocaine, I'd make arguments up just so I could go out and do what I wanted to do.
Exactly.
I would literally cause the argument rather than ask the question. I would cause an argument because in my head, I'd already answered the question that she'd say no.
And probably you go out the house and she's thinking, well, how was that about? I didn't even know what the argument was about. And it's just confusing for others until they figure out what's going on. And then the only person you're lying to is yourself.
Yeah.
Solutions question to problems we didn't know we had.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's sort of how I describe addiction. It's never the problem; it's the response or solution to the problem.
As the way I think of it is, it's always a solution to the previous problem.
Yeah.
And that's a solution to a previous problem. That's a solution to a previous problem. So, for example, somebody take something a simple, a socially accepted addiction like smoking. Smoking is a response to something. It's a solution to the problem of stress. Stress is a solution to the problem of wanting to say yes to everybody. That's a solution to the problem that people might not like me and accept me and look after me. And that's a solution to a previous problem. So I think if we isolate any step in that and say, right, smoking's a problem, you've got to be cured. It's a, it's a condition. then we're taking one link in that sequence out of context.
Mm.
And I think, if we think of it as a sequence of events, then very quickly we get back to what is it that you believe is true about yourself or the world that is causing this sequence of events that inevitably will lead you to smoking, drinking, something stronger, something. It's inevitable because you've reached the point where your body can't produce all the chemicals it needs in order to manage that situation. So we've got to get some externally.
Yeah.
And, lots of chemicals we rely on getting from the environment we can't make for ourselves.
Yeah.
Certain fatty acids that are used to make nerve fibers, vitamins. We can't manufacture everything we need. We're dependent on what we consume, and and things then like sugar and caffeine, and everything that's stronger are really we could say are escalations of that same sequence of events.
Great.
How do you, obviously therapy is huge. How do people find the right words for themselves?
They don't have to.
Okay.
That's the therapist's job. If you're doing the therapist's job for them, you're still self-medicating. So, it's like taking your car to the garage and saying, "What are you going to tighten that bit up? Are you going to change the? You're going to check the oil?" And you don't stand there and tell them what to do. You trust them, and say, "Right, here's the keys. Give it back when you're finished." If you go to the therapist, let the therapist do their job. They will help you. And I think we put a lot of reliance on words, and if I'm critical, I think therapists are partly to blame for this. Because of the prevalence and a lot of the research work that's been done around talking therapies, I think often there's a lot of pressure for people to put experiences into words, and they don't always have to. And there are a lot of very, very good therapists who have other ways of understanding the client's reality or helping the client to express their reality without words being the first point of reference. And we communicate in so many different ways. Our body is a physical body is a very sophisticated communication system. We are very capable of communicating multiple messages all at the same time. And a good therapist will pay attention to all of that. And it's quite normal for somebody starting out in a process of seeking help to not say anything at all for the first one or few sessions. Anybody who's seen a film called Hancock, which is about an alcoholic superhero with Will Smith? He ends up in voluntarily admitting himself to prison, and so he goes to the prison therapy circle, and every time they say, "What do you want to share?" and he says nothing and pass, and doesn't say anything. And then eventually he starts to offer words, and he gets support, and he finds more words, and so on. But the very, very first thing he's communicating is so easy to overlook because we put pressure on people. You've got to say something. You've got to use the word addict, like you said earlier. You've got to put a label on it. And we're putting so much pressure on people to be articulate. And actually, he was communicating in that scene something vitally important just by being there. So if you go and visit a therapist or anybody else who is going to support you on the journey, and you just sit there and say nothing, you are communicating far more just by sitting there. That is the valuable bit, and a good therapist will recognize and support that and not pressure you to find words.
Got a couple more questions. I feel like I could have this conversation for a few hours, but I know how busy everybody is. Both you deal in human potential. What's the most misunderstood idea about the brain or subconscious mind in the coaching world right now?
You got any thoughts on that, John?
I'm going to maybe start with the manifestation thing, Lee. I think the way a lot of people, social media, talk about affirmations and the way that's going to create manifestations, I just think it's absolute nonsense. I do think there is an inevitability around the identity statements that we have, but often those identity statements are spoken with emotion. They're spoken out of experience, and it's already a proven track record in our life that pattern is occurring in our life, and there is an inevitability, for manifestation, and I use that word very cautiously. Those statements will produce results, and the way social media is, and the self-help is about affirmation and going to manifest this, that, and the next thing, not understanding processes of how values, beliefs, emotions tied up into that, and it's just rattling off some pleasant affirmations. Yeah, I have a tough time with that.
Yeah, I think that's a good one. Affirmations I think they were very popular a few years ago, and I think by saying that you're becoming something, what you're actually saying is that you're not it.
Yes.
So I think they're counterproductive. Coincidentally, I'm inching towards completion with a new book, which is called The Big Self-Help Lie. And every chapter is a different lie that the self-help industry is telling you in order to make money out of you.
Wow.
And I think there's certainly mention of affirmations in the book. I'm going to pick probably the first one out of that, which is that you can have whatever you want.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a very misleading idea. If you work hard enough, or if you're persistent enough, or you have all of these other qualities, whatever these qualities are that this guru on Instagram is going to teach you via their amazing, e-learning series or whatever it is, that you can have whatever you want. And the reason that's a misleading is because of the word want. And we're tricked into thinking that the word want means desire. It doesn't. It means lack.
Mm.
So want is a comparison. And how do you know that you are in want of something? How do you know that you lack something? How do you know that you want a sports car or a fantastic body or whatever it is? Not a trick question.
But you don't have it.
But, how do you know you don't have it? This comes back to what I was saying earlier about points of reference, comparisons.
Feedback, don't see the evidence.
Because you can see somebody else has got it. And when that picture on social media is almost certainly a lie. And I was updated, so I was working on the book the other day, and I wrote something in the book about some sarcastic thing about some life coach, and you see a picture of them standing in front of a sports car, and therefore they must be successful. Literally within 24 hours. So that hadn't gone anywhere. I just typed that into the book file. Literally within 24 hours, I saw this guy on LinkedIn posting a picture of himself in front of a sports car that wasn't his, saying, look how I'm an amazing, successful coach. I'm thinking, no, you're not. So I think the idea that you can have whatever you want, it presupposes you comparing yourself to other people and you haven't got what they've got. And the reason why that's unhelpful or even destructive is because they're calling the shots. They're telling you what you should have. And
how do we know what we actually want in comparison to what society tells us?
Excellent question. And the answer is blindingly obvious. If you look around you right now, you will see the evidence of what you have wanted in your life up to this point. Because you've collected stuff according to what you have wanted, what you've chosen, the choices that you've made in the past. And if you look around yourself and you think, I don't know why I've got any of this stuff, or this isn't how I want to live, then you know where to start. But I think it's a common question. How will I know what I want? And it's a question that comes up a lot in career choices for people as well, life choices. And my advice to people in terms of career anyway is always, you don't know. People say, how will I know what I'm good at? How will I know what I want to do? You won't. So you try lots of different things and you see which ones you like. And it's like going to an all-you-can-eat buffet and thinking, oh, I don't know what to have. You can try all of it. And my strategy, if we go to a Chinese all-you-can-eat buffet, is try a few different things and then go back a couple more times and have more of the things I liked most. And that doesn't just apply to all-you-can-eat buffets. That's life in general. If you think, hey, I wonder what this particular job would be like, go and do it for a bit. And if you can't, just walk into the job, go and volunteer, go and shadow somebody, go and talk to somebody who does the job. Try stuff. It's okay to try stuff. And I think, this probably comes back to another answer to the question that you just asked, which is that I think there's huge pressure on people to do one thing and do one thing forever, because we put pressure on people by valuing commitment and persistence and tenacity, and by shaming people who give up. Paradoxically, if you read the autobiography of any entrepreneur, it will have more stories of failure in it than success. Because actually being a successful, whatever that means, entrepreneur means actually learning a lot by screwing things up and then starting again and continually refining that over time. An entrepreneur is not a person who starts a business once and then that's it. It's a constant cycle of, that didn't go the way I hoped it would. Let's try again. And I think, this illusion that gets put on us, pushed onto us, that we have to commit and we have to make choices and stick to them. But we don't. And like marriage, you marry somebody when you're in your 20s. By the time you're in your 30s or 40s, you're a different person. You wouldn't have married, and that's fine. Yeah. And people like, in a certain generation, my parents' generation, my parents probably would have gotten divorced if they'd gotten married today, because they're always arguing with each other. But, they made it work because they had to make it work, and that was the rules. And, you marry for life, you made your bed, lie in it. That's what my mother used to say. And actually, it's okay to change your mind, and it's okay to wake up one day and decide you're going to do something different.
Yeah. Sounds what you were saying there about what we want, if we can look around us. What you say, John, similar to, we don't get in life what we want, we get in life who we are. And who we are is our environment, is the people around us, is the beliefs, the skills we have. And sounds like they're slightly worded differently, but almost both going in the same direction of what you both say is, let's say what we want, for instance. I've got one more question, and then I'll let you head off. Because, well, when I say I'll let you head off, my missus will be asking me, you better come home for your tea very soon. But I'll blame you two for that. It's the easiest way.
Yeah.
If you had to summarize your life's philosophy in a paragraph or a couple of paragraphs, and also the belief that guides everything you do, what would it be?
Jeez. Yeah.
Anything come to mind for you, John?
Lee, that's a big question. Probably.
Well, I'll give you 5 minutes for it.
Well, probably much like the comment that you quoted there just now is in life for me, it's not about getting what you want. It's about manifesting who you are. And that, want to put it in context with what I've learned from Peter tonight is, I think it's always been just a constant understanding of my role and function in relation to the environment that I was in relation to the people that communicating with or through, for, and finding a balance between helping them get what it is they were hoping for, helping them meet their expectations in a way that at the same time was still resourceful and beneficial for me, in that process. I think through all of that, I call myself a teaspoon. I still think my life philosophy, if you would come to answer that, I think people have what they need within them. And being a teaspoon, I don't know if a cup can stir itself. So if you're making, a cup of coffee, you've got coffee, more sugar in it, you add the water, you're going to take a spoon and you're going to stir it. I think people are like the cups, they have everything that they need. And I sometimes think we walk blind to the fact that everything is within us. And it needs a bit of stirring, it needs a bit of reframing, juxtapositioning a bit, in order, if you like, to complete the puzzle or to complete a version of the puzzle that we like. And I think that is, I don't think there is an end to that. I think we're always going to be doing it. And to lend from Peter in his conversation about the entrepreneur, in life, I think we are entrepreneurs, that we are learning constantly and making those changes. The more we understand who we are, the more we understand what we want, the more we understand the relationships that we have around us, and we're juggling those or shifting those puzzle pieces within us to connect with others, that we all win-win all round. That wasn't a very coherent response. Buying Peter time to answer.
Yeah, exactly.
And mine's going to come out with this eloquent masterpiece and sicken me. Yeah. Okay.
Exactly.
I don't think that question is designed to be a perfect answer. I mean, we're talking about us as human beings and what your individual philosophy is. And, what's right to one person is wrong to another, perception, right? And that what the whole purpose of that question being the last question was, because you'll see a difference. I'd imagine you'll see a huge difference in both answers, but yet you're in the same framework, if you like. You do similar things. You teach people similar things, and that's the beauty of life and the beauty of individuality, right?
I think that's a really interesting and I think a heartfelt philosophy as well that you've shared there, John. I think the thing that came to my mind was particularly when I was a teenager, I think the sort of mantra, I suppose, that used to run around in my head was nobody cares about me. what I fit in. I always felt like I didn't fit in or belong, and read psychology books on why, trying to find out why that was. And all I read was a bunch of labels for conditions that didn't really describe me or didn't want to describe me, I guess. I think now, more recently in my life, it's changed from nobody cares to nobody cares, which might sound like a subtle difference, but it's one in which I think the place that I'm at now, and my philosophy now, is nobody cares. I can do whatever I want. Nobody cares. Nobody's stopping me. Nobody cares about me breaking speed limits when I'm driving. Occasionally I get stopped by the police. Occasionally I get points on my license. But nobody's telling me, I can't. There's rules around that are designed for people's safety and my safety, and that's fine, and I accept that. And if I know, me personally, if I know that nobody cares, I can do whatever I want. I can make whatever choices I want. Nobody's judging what I'm doing. Well, people are judging what I'm doing, but that's up to them. That says nothing about me. Other people's feedback tells me more about them than it does about me. And so I think the thing that's been the realization for me that's been life-changing, really, is that nobody's stopping me from doing anything I want to do. Nobody's giving me permission. Nobody's judging or validating, or if I think something is interesting, I'll give it a go, and if I like it, I'll do more of it, and if I don't like it, then probably won't do that again. And there's things I've tried, like sea urchin, when I was in Hong Kong recently. I urge you to try it just for the revenge, really, because it was absolutely the worst thing I've ever. I don't see why I should be the only one to suffer. It was the worst thing I've ever eaten in my life. My friend who took me to this Japanese restaurant absolutely loves it, and eats it for fun. So what do I know? So I think that would be my philosophy, that's where I am currently. Because when I worked in the telecoms industry for 20 years, and when I became self-employed, which was 2002, I said to myself, I'm going to do this for as long as I enjoy it, and if I stop enjoying it, I'll do something else. And about 4 years ago, I realized I'd stopped enjoying it, so for various reasons, and so I had a bit of a change of direction, which has been very beneficial for me. And when we get attached to what other people want us to be, or we get attached to what other people think of us, or and that's a mantra from our parents' generations. What will people think if you do that? What will people think if you drop out of school? What will people think if you go to work in that place, or what will people think of you? And the reality is, most people don't care. They're not thinking anything. This comes up so much with things like people are afraid of public speaking. They think, what are the audience thinking of me? You're lucky if they're thinking anything at all about you. They're probably thinking, have I left the gas on? I must get some milk on the way home. Geez, when's this going to stop? I'm hungry. I want to go to the toilet. Whatever. They're not thinking about you. And we're kind of indoctrinated to become so self-conscious and so aware of what we think other people are thinking of us. The reality most of the time is they're not. They couldn't care less about you. They're thinking about themselves. And so I think that realization that nobody cares. You can do whatever you want. Nobody's stopping you. But that means that whatever you choose to do, that's on you. For good or bad.
Yeah. And that, again, honesty and accountability were two things when I'll use the words that came into recovery for the sake of the conversation. They were the two biggest things for me, honesty and accountability. I was the one, people said, oh, it wasn't your fault, it's a disease. No, by saying those things, that, like my fiance said to me, does that mean the pain and suffering that you put me through isn't, that just gets pushed to one side because it wasn't your fault? No, it was absolutely my fault. And it's funny, I I did my first public speaking event Saturday last week, and I was shitting myself because I thought there was about 50 people there. And I was told, some of the most difficult parts of my life to speak about. And when we talk about judgment, there was never any judgment from anybody in that room. It was all internal judgment. It was me judging myself, saying, am I ready? Am I worthy of standing up here and having a conversation in front of these people? And the answer was yes. But I questioned the fuck out of that. I did before I
it's a funny paradox because this comes up so often in coaching, as you can imagine. People say, "Am I ready? Am I good enough?" And my answer is, "No, you're not." But who cares? Do it anyway.
Yeah.
It's very liberating.
Lots of people are doing stuff that they're not good enough at.
It is a liberating way of thinking about it. Yeah,
that's very liberating.
It's funny because I play a lot of golf.
You're bad at.
Yeah. I play a lot of golf, and I played in a golf competition probably 2-3 months ago, and it was a really big competition. And what you just said there, your mantra, your philosophy, played with an elderly gentleman, doesn't hit the ball that far. And I was on the tee, and I was nervous because there was a lot of people watching, and he turned to me, and he said, "Big fella, look at me." So I turned around, and I said, "What?" He said, "Nobody gives a fuck where you hit that golf ball." I just thought, he's right.
Yeah. I can't even see where you fit it. Just pretend. Yeah, exactly. I think, Just,
very interesting. No, it's a very liberating.
Nobody knows how you're supposed to be living your life.
Very true.
Not even you. So just try stuff, see what happens.
I know you need to go, Lee, but Peter, what's your take on purpose, pursuit of purpose?
That was going to be my last question. I just thought
it's one of the chapters in the book. I think the principle is fine. I think it's a good idea in principle. But as is often the case with these things, the way it's practically implemented and the way that people talk about it is a problem, or can create a problem. You've got to have a purpose, and you've got to do stuff with purpose and so on. I think there's a really, really really easy way to find out what your purpose is. And I've spoken to lots of people over the years. I don't know what my purpose is. There's a really easy way to find out what your purpose is. So if I think of, just surrounded by junk, just happen to have a light bulb on my desk just because I took it out the light fitting and swapped it and couldn't be bothered to put it back in the garage. So what is this bulb's purpose?
Bring light.
And how do we know that that's its purpose?
Told its purpose. We told.
Sorry?
We are told.
Well, we as a human race, we made it.
That's true.
But we know what its purpose is because we know why we made it. I just got a 3D printer. I've been printing all sorts of crazy things for my mostly camera accessories. So I printed this thing. I know exactly what its purpose is because I designed it. I made it to do a certain job. So if we want to know what something's purpose is, we have to ask the person who made it. So if you want to know what your purpose is in life, there are only two people who are going to be able to tell you what that is. One is whichever God you subscribe to, or you can ask your parents why they had sex. And if they say, they might not tell you the truth, but if the truth is, we would just, I wanted somebody to, carry on the family business, then you know what your purpose is. And the thing is, because your parents know exactly why they wanted kids, that purpose gets transmitted accidentally. So, the person that's born into a family that has a family business feels this great pressure that that they are expected to take that on and run that when the parent retires, and they feel that tremendous weight of responsibility, and they don't know, they run the business. And there's films where we see this played out. Inception has this theme in it. Kinky Boots, where the guy inherits the shoe factory off his dad, has the theme in it. He's trying to run a business that he can't run because he doesn't know why he's running it, other than it was expected of him. And but if we can actually find that out, then we can make an informed choice. And if your parents had sex, because, as my mother always told me, because I was an accident, then well, that's actually quite a weight of responsibility gone. I can do whatever. Then my purpose was recreational, so I can just do whatever I find interesting in life. I don't have the burden of carrying on the family business or the family name or inheriting the family fortune or being a companion for my sibling, or, as in the case of my sister's purpose, to care for her mother. And and that was something she always struggled with, feeling like she was expected to be our mother's carer. And that kind of defined her life, even though she was explicitly told that, a daughter's role is to look after her mother. My mum would say that, but nobody ever took it seriously. It's like just one of those things that she said. But our parents accidentally and intentionally communicate our purpose to us. So it's worth listening to that. Having said that, because we are self-correcting, autonomous thinking, self-aware machines, we can choose to change that purpose if we want to. So if I know that the reason that my parents wanted a family was because of whatever reason, but actually, do you know what? That was great for them back then, but that doesn't suit me now. I'm going to do something different. And I think it's helpful to be aware of that, to be able to articulate that, because then you can think, well, I'll do the things that I choose to do. And so I think the need, or the pressure that you've got to do stuff that has purpose. Why? Just do stuff because you like it. That's enough. And one of the nonsensical things I see a lot on social media is you have to give every day 100%. Why? Not every day deserves 100%. When I go on holiday, I'm going on holiday next week. On holiday, I'm going to give every day 100%. But at work, it's not that. Work doesn't deserve more than 50%. When I'm having fun doing when I go to the pub with my wife, that will get 100%. When I'm doing the ironing, that will get maybe 20%.
Yeah.
Not every day needs 100%. Not everything you do needs a purpose. It's okay to do stuff just because it seems like fun, or because you like it, or because you're good at it, or because you like the people who you do it with. That's enough.
Yeah.
I think that's a good place to end it.
You do a podcast
Really
yourself,
enjoy.
Peter? Sorry, Lee, I'm taking over your questions.
Okay, go on. Carry on, mate.
Yeah, I do. I do a podcast that's for a publisher. And so that's released only within a closed community. So I interview business leaders and corporate people and so on. And for that's not a public podcast. So no, not really. I thought about it a couple of times, but to be honest, I just can't be bothered to do it often enough to make it worth listening to. So no, in the end. So I guess my alternative, my version is to occasionally release new videos. So yeah.
Well, I'm dying of thirst here in
You done,
Africa
John?
for new videos from you. So anytime soon would be great. Thank you.
That's very kind of you. Thank you. Thank you.
Well,
Just watch the old ones, one of my favourite authors is Raymond Chandler, who created the character, the detective character, Philip Marlowe. I don't like detective or crime stories, but I like Raymond Chandler because the way you tell stories is so vivid and so rich, and it's so immersive, and it's just fascinating. And his stories are so complicated. I could take the book on holiday every year, like a book like The Big Sleep or The Long Goodbye. I could read it every year and I've forgotten what happens. So it's always a surprise. It's like that with my videos. Just watch the old ones again and you'll have forgotten what happened.
No, I do.
Watch the reruns.
I do. Bits and pieces.
Thank you.
Okay, Lee, we'll give it back to you now.
Yeah, that's it. I really appreciate you both giving me your time. I think there's a lot in there that people can take away. Yeah, I think for me, it's just a case of carrying on doing what I'm doing, improving. And you know what? My missus won't like what you said there at the end, Peter, but I fucking love it because for me, some days, this year's, I give myself a whole 12 months just to even get to I'll call it a baseline for the sake of the conversation of this new adult or going back to identity, this new process because I struggled, mate, for a fair few months. I struggled, especially when it comes to a Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and a Sunday. Where I found simplicity has been a real valuable tool in my arsenal. One of the first individuals I ever spoke to on this podcast had wrote a book called Keep It Simple. And I think now when it's almost the simplicity of complexity, I like to call it, where things get a little bit too much and I'm sort of feeling that burnout starting to show its face. I'll do absolutely nothing for about 6 hours. 6, 7 hours in the evening, I'll do absolutely nothing. Well, I say nothing. I'll put a film on, I'll lie on the sofa, and I'll chill out, I said to John last week, he asked me what I've been doing, and I said, I've been lying on the bed doing absolutely nothing for the last hour. And I think it's an important thing to do is, like you said, every day doesn't need to be about NLP or psychology or neuroscience or going to the gym or eating the right food. Some days you can just do absolutely nothing, and that's all right.
Yeah. And all these people on social media saying, you've got to get out there and smash it. No, you don't. You don't. Just enough. You look at, even the Olympics. Nobody... It's extraordinarily rare for anybody to win a gold medal and be, miles ahead of the silver. They're a millimeter ahead, a millisecond, a microsecond. I think with the men's 100 meters, they're now measuring in microseconds. Because the difference is that small. You don't have to be so far out ahead, in front of everybody else that you're invisible. You just enough. Just enough is enough.
Just enough is enough. I like that.
Just over the line. That's all it needs. Like you were saying about rock bottom, just enough to turn that corner, to know, to feel that you are on a different path. That's it. And however you define that, whatever words you put that into, it doesn't have to be amazing by anybody else's standards. It's it's enough, just enough for you.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
That's it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Oh, very much, mate.
Job done.
It's been a pleasure talking to you both, and so interesting to hear your perspectives as well, John. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. It's been very interesting, Kenny.